All right, Ashley Winchester, here you are.
Here I am.
Thank you so much for joining me, the Do Big Things podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. How are you tonight?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good.
It's kind of rainy and snowy in Southern Oregon right now,
Mm,
so
okay.
kind of holed up in the office today, and yeah, just I was super excited to get on here with you and talk
Totally.
today.
Absolutely. Hash it out. I want to hear
Yeah.
all about your writing. I want to hear about your podcast. I want to hear about your FKTs. I want to hear about your upcoming FKT attempt. I want to hear about everything. So,
Oh, we're gonna be here all day.
no kidding. Where do we start?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, where do you want to start?
Well, okay. So you said you're a writer before we jumped
Mhm.
on. So I definitely want to hear about that. So let's start there. What kind of writing do you
Yeah.
do? Who do you write for? What's up?
So, yeah, there's a little bit of a backstory. I haven't always been a writer. I actually spent the last about 13 years in veterinary medicine and
Oh,
as kind of a veterinary nurse, and kind of specialized in internal medicine and just got really burnt out with the amount of hours that I was working. And I decided that I needed a change. I put a lot of my priority in my physical fitness and running and adventuring, and the veterinary field like kind of almost requires you to dedicate yourself to it
mm,
in a big way. So I was working 14 and 15-hour shifts, just totally exhausted on my feet all day. And the running and training and everything was really suffering, and I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do because of that. So I decided it's time for a change. Started pursuing freelance writing because I always liked writing. It was always a strong point of mine, and
mm,
was really fortunate in that I knew somebody who is a freelance writer, and so he introduced me to a couple of people. I started writing. Initially started off in just kind of those clickbaity type articles.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Like blog
And
posts.
yeah, kind of like blog posts, or those things that people like repost on Facebook that's like, click here for the 5 miracle, tips
Yes.
for weight loss, that kind of a thing.
Okay.
I didn't do anything quite that bad, but it was similar kind of clickbaity articles. But it was like you kind of have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So I was doing that, and I was ghostwriting a little bit
Mm,
for a couple of companies that, pretty much they would give me something like a topic to write about, and I would write it as if I was like a CEO or something of a this big company that the blog was for, and it would get posted under that person's name instead of mine. So it's kind of weird when you get into freelance writing like that, because you can't really grow your portfolio very easily. Um, so yeah, and then I ended up writing for this company called Oberlo, which is a drop shipping company that's owned by Shopify. And I did a bunch of like marketing and search engine optimization type posts, and things that were actually kind of outside my realm of experience, but it was more writing experience and paid writing. And actually, recently, I've started pitching articles and connecting with outdoor companies. And now I'm actually able to, I've been writing more and more for, companies. Like I wrote a blog for Hoka One, and I'm currently writing something for Sawyer, the water filter company. And so I've been able to kind of hook up with outdoor companies, and recently been breaking into writing about adventure and writing about my personal adventures.
nice.
So yeah, it's been kind of a crazy ride for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah.
So what's it like being a ghostwriter and not getting credit for what you wrote? Like, I mean, could I say that I was a ghostwriter for all these CEOs and no one would know the difference, or how does that work?
No, no, I mean, so you actually, when you do something like that, you always sign an agreement saying that you will never claim that work, and you will never, like publicly announce that you wrote that piece for that person or anything. So you can't really, it's weird. You can't really talk about it much.
Wow.
You know, you end up working with like copywriting type firms. And so I worked with this firm that would just give me assignments, and they paid terribly. But it was a way that I could get my foot in the door. And then, you know, the guy who I was working with at that firm kind of was able to give me like a recommendation. You know, he kind of was able to publicly say, yeah, she does good work. And that helped sort of get me in with some other companies.
Sure.
But yeah, the freelance writing world is interesting. It's kind of confusing to navigate at first. I'm still figuring it out, and I've been doing it for a couple of years now.
Okay. So give me an example of some of the clickbaity articles you wrote.
Oh man, I'd have to go back and check. It was like some of the first articles that I wrote. And I can, if like I'm on my computer, so I could look at them real quick if you want me to.
I'm curious.
Yeah, let me bring up my documents, and I'll check real quick, because they are, I mean, they're not super exciting.
No, I'm just curious, like how to get a boyfriend in 30 days or how to get rich. I'm curious.
No, I gotta find it. Let's see. Here we go. Oh, so I mean, I guess I probably shouldn't give the actual like name of the article, because I suppose you could look it up and tell that that person didn't actually write it. But
okay.
I wrote an article about the athleisure industry, and yeah, and how like this company kind of monetize the athleisure industry. I wrote one of the clickbaity ones that I wrote was, you know, like 5 tools to monetize your Instagram,
okay,
that kind of a thing. You know, so they're not like terrible, but they're not like, you know, those very exciting or thoughtful articles that I would prefer to be writing.
Yeah, well, you know, you got to start somewhere, and I'm intrigued with the whole writing process. I'm kind of an armchair writer myself, and have been for years, so I dig it. Do you have any interest in ever writing a book or a novel or something about your adventures? Or okay, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do actually. I would love to write kind of a book based on my life, because I just, the way I grew up and then the things that I've experienced in my adult life, I feel like are very interesting and unique, and could provide some value to people who might be going through the same things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's always kind of been in the back of my mind. And then I actually really want to write a book about the like traditional Native American stories that explain the kind of the development of the Cascade volcanoes in Oregon and Washington. There's some really amazing stories behind those mountains, and that I've done a little bit of research on, but that's another one that I really want to kind of start writing here soon.
Cool. So this is your gig now, writing?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
I know. It's crazy.
you're making it happen. That's awesome.
Making it happen.
Well, let's go back. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? What got you into, you know, veterinarian school and eventually wanted to drop that and running? And I want to hear it all.
Yeah. So I grew up in this little town called Boonville, California. Little tiny town, kind of nestled in these hills with redwoods and oak trees, and in Northern California. It's really close to the coast, so I had access to the ocean. We did a little bit of ocean fishing and a lot of exploring in the tide pools and stuff at the ocean, but mostly my childhood, I have an older brother and a younger sister, and my parents would pretty much just kind of kick us out of the house and say, go play. And we lived on about 1,000 acres and we would just take off. I was usually barefoot. And, you know, sometimes we'd take our little BB guns. We were 7 years old, 7 and 8 years old. And we would just disappear into the woods for the whole entire day. And I think that really shaped who I am as a person, and kind of, you know, like we learned at a young age how to respect nature and how to kind of navigate through it safely. You know, I remember wandering off on hikes by myself when I was young, and you know, that was kind of the way my mom was raised, and she, you know, she experienced the same thing growing up, and it just didn't seem weird to us at all growing up that way. And you know, my mom would take us out and we learned about edible plants. We learned to identify bugs and snakes and lizards and stuff like that. We were always like catching and touching and holding things and eating things. And, you know, we'd go out and collect wild blackberries and, you know, make pies. And, you know, I have a very fond memory with my brother of like having blackberry fights where we would like pick the berries and just throw them at each other. And we just purple stained kids, you know, showing up at the door in the evening, and my mom would hose us off in the yard, and we'd go in and have dinner. So it was this really great childhood that kind of set the tone for my love of the wilderness and being outdoors. And then, you know, after high school, I moved out when I was 17, and went to college here and there, but didn't really like focus on anything specifically at first. I started actually working in veterinary medicine. It was my first real job, and I worked in the kennels. And so I walked dogs and fed dogs and cleaned up poop and cleaned cages. That's how I got my start in it. And I just spent so many years that I ended up sort of working my way up through the ranks. So then I started assisting, and working more along the technicians and, you know, the nurses in the treatment room. I ended up working in reception, and, you know, just kind of gathered all of this experience throughout the years, and then eventually ended up working at an emergency hospital where I got to work with some like really specialized doctors. So, you know, we had our internal medicine specialist that's who I ended up working with specifically. We had, they have cardiology, you know, specialty surgery services, specialty imaging services. It's a big hospital. And that's where I ended up working. And I still love veterinary medicine. I love the kind of puzzle behind figuring out different illnesses, especially in internal medicine, where, you know, we always got the kind of more difficult cases that came through, more difficult to diagnose, more difficult to manage. And so I always enjoyed kind of the puzzle of putting everything together and then helping this, you know, the sick animal get better. But, you know, there's that other side of veterinary medicine that's really heartbreaking. And you end up kind of, they call it compassion fatigue, where, you know, especially empathetic people, like myself and a lot of people who end up in veterinary medicine, you end up so fatigued with just caring. And you end up kind of not caring anymore after a while, which is a really sad reality in any kind of medical industry. But when I reached that point, I kind of was like, you know, this isn't like me. Something needs to change. You know, I was kind of feeling depressed and really just worn out. And then we ended up with the campfire, which was the big fire that raged through Paradise, California, and destroyed the town in 2018. And that one really got me, because we ended up seeing hundreds of burn victims, animals from that fire. And that, like, I'm still kind of speechless over it, because I can, there's some PTSD from that experience. And that's when I really knew I couldn't handle that kind of suffering anymore. So I had to get out. And that's when I kind of more seriously started looking for something that would be more fulfilling to me, kind of less stressful. And I settled on writing, and then made it happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you never went to school to be a veterinarian?
No, I never was a veterinarian. I worked as a veterinary assistant.
Okay.
Yeah. And so kind of like a veterinary nurse was more of my job. I worked alongside the veterinarians, but I'm not a doctor.
yeah, for sure.
I'm not a doctor.
I can only imagine after that fire. So you guys were dealing with all kinds of animals, right?
Yeah.
Like more than cats and dogs.
It was actually mostly cats, but we had a bit of wildlife come through. We had some dogs. The dogs, I think, were able to be evacuated more easily than the cats, because, outdoor cats kind of disappear, and dogs are usually like at your side, or within a fence. You can go and grab them and evacuate with them. So there was less of the dogs. It was a lot of cats, and some wildlife that came through.
Wow. And you're a cat person. You have 2 cats, right?
I actually wouldn't necessarily call myself a cat person, but yes, I have 2 cats. I love cats. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I do love cats, but I am actually a dog person. I had two big dogs for a long time. One of them passed away, and my other dog was extremely lonely, and I didn't really I wasn't ready to adopt another dog. So I already had a cat at that time, and they became buddies. And so my dog and my cat were kind of buddies. And then my dog passed away, and I had a really lonely cat. So instead of, getting another dog, I decided to adopt another cat, because cats are so independent that I could, kind of leave them for a weekend with their litter box and food and stuff like that, and go on an adventure and then come back, and not have to worry too much about them. And it's, easier to kind of have friends take care of them, because they just have to drop in every now and then and make sure the cats are okay. So that's kind of why I decided to get a second cat. And so now I have 2 cats and no dogs.
No dogs.
Yeah. But they're great. They're very sweet.
What kind of dogs did you have?
The one that was kind of my heart dog, he was a Shar-Pei mix. So he was mixed, must have been mixed with some kind of lab or something, because he was a big dog. He was about 80 pounds. But he had the wrinkles on his forehead and the little stubby ears like Shar-Peis do. So he just had this really adorable look to him. Yeah.
Cool. Do you ever think about getting a dog?
All the time.
Yeah. And dogs can go on adventures. Like
I know.
That goes hand in hand right there.
I know. Believe me, it's something that is like, every time I see somebody adopt a puppy, I'm always like, ooh, I want a puppy. I want a puppy again. But no, it's not in the cards right now. I just move around too much, and it wouldn't be fair to adopt a dog at this point in my life. I just don't have the space or the ability to really give them what they need at the moment. So I'm making a responsible decision by not adopting a dog right now, but it's going to happen eventually. I spent my whole entire life with pets. So
they're the best. I have a 1-year-old golden retriever, and it's my second golden, and she comes out on all of our adventures with us, and she's just a little ball of energy. She can run forever. I mean,
Yeah,
she's going to be an ultra dog.
Yeah. Yeah, if I got a dog right now, it would have to be an FKT dog.
Yeah, totally.
Definitely have to be an ultra dog.
When did you start running? When did that come into the picture?
So yeah, there's a story behind that too.
Cool. I love stories.
So I actually was in a pretty abusive relationship for a long time. When I was 22, I met this man who I thought, I was going to be with forever. And we ended up getting married, and it turned out that he was abusive. And so I spent years, almost 10 years in this abusive relationship. And I think it was in like 2010 or 2011 that I kind of was like, I want to race. It was actually the Tough Mudder that got me, because I saw it advertised and I was like, oh, I want to do that. That looks like so much fun. Mm-hmm. And so I started jogging here and there and kind of set my sights on a 5K to sort of like, okay, I make sure that I can handle and some kind of distance, and started running. And the person that I was with was very adamant that I would never be able to be a runner, that it was not something that was in my realm of capabilities. I constantly got you're not a runner. You don't have a runner's body. What are you doing? Why are you even thinking about this? It's, just a lot of negativity towards it. But once I started running, and especially once I started running on trails, it was like the only thing that made me feel kind of whole again. Mm-hmm. It helped me think. It helped me process. It was my therapy. And it was, during my training runs, where I kind of had like breakthroughs in my thought processes and like realizations of what was happening to me and where my life was headed. And I just started running more and more and more. And I didn't listen to what he had to say. And I started racing longer races. I started, of course, with like 5Ks and then 10Ks and half marathon. And then I went to a marathon, and I was like, I wonder if I could ever run a 50K. And it seemed so out of reach at the time that I was like, like that's a really long ways. But then he said, you can't do that. And I was like, oh yeah, watch me. Mm-hmm. So we actually ended up separating before I ran my first ultra marathon, but not long after I ran, it was a loop course. It was a 6-hour loop course. And I ran 30 miles during that. And I was so excited. I actually got the first place female.
Nice.
And I was so excited, and I was kind of hooked at that point. So I ran another ultra a few weeks later, and placed second in that one. And I was like, okay, I can actually do this stuff.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I decided that I was going to start branching out and exploring more adventurous activities. I decided that I wasn't going to say no. There's no more negativity. I was going to say yes to trying new things. And so that's when I started backpacking. That's when I started I started rock climbing. I had my first mountaineering experiences all like within a year, and just completely fell in love with these, big adventures in the outdoors. And the longer the days and the longer the backpacking trips, and the happier I was, the more complete I felt. And so it became an addiction. Mm-hmm. I couldn't stop adventuring. And it was actually on a backpacking trip that I felt so much peace, and just felt like I really was where I was meant to be. And I was like, I have to somehow figure out how to make my life revolve around this. Like I want other people to feel this. I want other people to know what it's like to spend days in the wilderness and to find that peace. And so I started kind of trying to figure out how I could do that. And that's sort of where, I was like, how do I build a community? How do I start guiding? How do I become a guide? And I actually this last year became a guide with Shasta Mountain Guides in Mount Shasta, California. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guide up like actual mountaineering up a 14,000 foot peak.
Cool.
In Northern California. And I just love sharing those experiences with people. And so with like my plan, hopefully within the next couple of years, we'll see what happens with COVID, but I want to start my own guiding business and start guiding backpacking. And my biggest goal is to get more women in the outdoors because, there's a real gap in the number of women who are out there crushing big things and the number of men. And it's not because we're not capable. We're 100% capable of doing all the same things that men are doing. But I think that there's a lack of accessibility for some women, and kind of having a safe space where you can go in and learn and ask questions. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I want to do eventually, is to focus on getting more women into the outdoors by having like clinics and courses and backpacking trips and stuff like that. Yeah. And I'll hopefully do all of that through the Women of the Wild platform that I'm kind of growing with my podcast and everything.
You are just like a hustler. You got a lot of things going on. You got a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah, I don't sit still very well. And I actually, if I don't have a lot going on, I feel like I don't know what to do with myself. And so I actually do my best work under pressure. So when I put a lot of pressure on myself, I'm able to actually get things done.
Yeah.
But if I have like free time, I kind of don't know what to do with myself.
Sure. Yeah. Do you feel like you could like empower women somehow with these experiences that you've had? Like if you were to start a guiding company and you're taking women out backpacking, is there any way to incorporate the two, as far as, I don't know, helping people or just talking with people and just getting your experiences out there to help other people? Is there a way to merge those together?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that just kind of sharing that space with people is helpful, because there's something about when you're out there and when you're walking together or running together, you talk and you share a lot more, it seems like. At least I've noticed that.
Yep.
And, even with the guests on, Mount Shasta and, even though I'm hired by Shasta Mountain Guides, I'm an employee with them. You still connect with your guests up on the mountain and you have these very deep and meaningful conversations. And I think that like having those conversations is helpful in and of itself. But one of the things that I'd like to do for some of these trips is to focus on, those kind of traumas, especially, domestic violence and stuff like that, and invite women, maybe create a scholarship for it so that some women have access to it who maybe wouldn't have had access to it otherwise, and bring along a therapist who can actually work with them in an outdoor space, in a very safe outdoor space. So that's also something that is in my plans. I get chills just thinking about it, because it's like, I do want to help women who have had the same experiences as me. And like, I'm very fortunate in that I found a way to cope, and I found a way to heal and get out. But I think a lot of women out there still, they don't have that ability. or maybe they just haven't found it yet and they need some guidance.
Yeah.
And I think that just being outdoors and getting yourself out there is so healing. Just being in nature is healing. And then moving your body and getting exercise is healing. And that's kind of, that's how I sort of found myself in my direction.
Yeah.
So I 100% believe that just getting out there and moving your body is helpful. And so I think that, combining sort of a therapist with that setting could be really something.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I would hate for you to have like those bad experiences for no reason. It's like, if you had to go through that, why not take that and use it for a positive somehow? If you can help other people that are going through that same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that I actually heard on another podcast at one point was turn your mess into your message. So whatever turmoil, whatever mess you have going on in your life, you can take that and turn it around and help other people with it, because there are other people who are going through the same things.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that I recently started sort of sharing my real story more publicly, is because I want people to know that you can go through these things and come out the other side and come out strong and, like with direction, and sort of turn your life around. Like all is not lost.
Yeah.
Because I know when I was really in the thick of it, my depression and anxiety and everything, I wanted to give up. I didn't care at one point if I got hurt or not. And, I kind of know what it feels like to be at the bottom of the barrel and kind of sort of fight your way out of it again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I want people to know that it's possible. And, it's not just, all of this stuff is not just for women either. I know there's a lot of men out there who are also in abusive relationships. And, it's, I want everybody to know that you can get yourself out and you can turn your life around. All is not lost.
Totally. No, I hear everything you're saying. I personally come from a background of alcoholism. I'm a recovering alcoholic. And so kind of same thing here. Like, I'm just looking for my path of service, I've been pretty darn low in my life, as it sounds like you have as well. And there was definitely times I didn't care whether or not I lived or died. And, lots of times I just wanted to walk in front of a bus, and life was pretty rough for a while. And, eventually found help, reached out to strangers, did the whole thing, and got myself to a better place. And running is one of the, there's a handful of things, but running is definitely one of the things that saved my life. And you're right, getting outside is just so powerful. Just being in nature, especially if you have access to, the mountains or national forest, or just getting outside, being alone with your thoughts, moving, sweating, getting some sun. It's all so powerful and extremely healing. And so I'm right there with you. I totally hear you. As far as the guiding goes, like, you're a fastie, like, you like to move really, really fast. And when you're guiding, sometimes you're guiding families that are moving really, really slow. And I do a little bit of guiding here in Boulder, up and down some of the local peaks. And that is something that I personally have an issue with. Like, how do you manage that? Like,
I'm still figuring it out.
Like, I really enjoy chatting with people, getting to know them. And I'm really passionate about, like, getting people to a finish line, or getting people to their first mountaintop that they've never been on. It inspires me and feeds my soul in a big, huge way. But, taking someone out for an all-day trip on something that I can do in under 2 hours, it hurts. It's like, I don't know if I can spend the whole day doing that.
Yeah, it's and on Mount Shasta, most of the time you're doing 2 or 3 day trips.
Okay.
And so, like, you hike a few miles in and set up base camp, and then the next day you you might hike to the high camp, which is just a couple more miles, and then set up camp, and then, summit the day after that, and then hike out. But that's something that I actually, when I got hired on with them, we talked about it, because they know their guides are all very athletic people, and a lot of us are runners, and a lot of us like to move fast in the mountains, and it's just something that you have to be really aware of. And actually, one of my co-guides on one of the trips, he said, just enjoy the zone 1 training. And I was like, I like this. Okay. Zone 1 training at altitude. I was like, okay, I can get behind that. And so I actually just really have to watch my pace. I actually literally pay attention to it and go, okay, like 45 minutes per mile. That's perfect. So it's hard, because especially if you don't have active conversation going between you and the people that you're guiding, sometimes you can kind of just get lost in thought, and you start picking up speed because your normal pace is faster. And so, you kind of have to pay attention and keep looking behind you and making sure that they're not breathing too hard, and they're not struggling too much, and that they're keeping up. So it's this kind of process of constantly being aware. And that's sort of your job as a guide too, is, you have to kind of constantly be aware of your people and the mountain and everything that's going on around you. So
totally.
I think it's good practice to be that aware and practice that kind of awareness. So yeah.
It's a practice. It really is.
Yeah.
Before we get into happy times and you running fast in the mountains and all that, do you mind talking about like how bad were things for you when you were in this abusive relationship? You don't have to get deep into it, but
yeah, so it was really manipulative. There's a lot of gaslighting involved. I felt like I was crazy all the time because he convinced me I was crazy all the time. At one point I thought about going and seeing a psychiatrist because he had convinced me that I was absolutely insane. And there was, definitely some physical violence, but a lot of it was, just a lot of just really controlling. I wasn't allowed to have friends, not friends of my choosing. I could have the friends that he chose for me. But, it's just, there was so much control over me and manipulation. Just the way he broke me down so much. I was convinced that I was worthless. He'd pull that kind of thing where, you're nothing without me. Just a lot of aggression. Everything I did, no matter how hard I tried, it was always a fight. And the fights would last for just hours and hours and hours until I gave in. And so it was, through the years, it was just like this constant wearing down. And honestly, if I hadn't found running, I'm not sure that I would have gotten myself out. Because that somehow I was able to make that a part of my life. And, even though he didn't want me to, I was able to make that a part of my life. And I'm just so grateful I did, because I don't think that I would have really been able to process things without it. I had one friend that I would go running with occasionally, that I was allowed to go running with occasionally. And she was the only one that I was able to kind of open up to initially. And she also helped me kind of process through these things and kind of, tell me very gently that what was going on was not healthy. But I was like 100% in on this relationship too. I was like, this is the person I chose. I married him, it was for better or for worse. And, this is my job and he needs me, and, just like all of the excuses that I could possibly come up with. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't, I don't talk about the details very often. But yeah, it's amazing how easy it is to sort of fall into those traps. And, it's like it's a progression over time. When we first started dating, it was really, it seemed good. Like it seemed healthy. Everybody loved him. He's very charismatic, your typical narcissistic, kind of sociopathic type person. Very charming, very charismatic. Everybody loves him when you first meet him. And so it was really easy to kind of fall into that. And he sort of made the relationship move really fast. So, within a couple months of meeting, we were living together, and then we moved to another state together a couple months after that. And then we were engaged, and then it was just like, it moved really fast. And I think that, it was a way of sort of trapping me. Yeah. And, so yeah. And then, moving to another state, it was sort of like, I felt stuck for a long time. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to something like that, I didn't realize how important it was to have like a trusted group of people around you. Because once I started sort of opening up about it a little bit more, I had a lot of friends step forward who I didn't even realize were going to be that, dedicated to me. And, just a lot of offers of, we'll give you a place to stay. You can stay with us for free. If you need to run away, when he goes on this trip this weekend, we'll go pack everything up. It was just like, I was suddenly just surrounded with all of this love and support from people. And I started to realize like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like this actually is bad. And it's time, like I can make a change. And with that kind of support from people, that love from people, I was able to kind of work up the courage to get out of there. And it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, because I was literally scared for my life. Yeah. He threatened me enough times that I believed that he would hurt me. And I think that in a way he had it in him. He came from a very abusive family. His dad threw him through a wall when he was a kid. Like it was, I believed that something bad could really happen. For sure. So, yeah, it was really crazy getting myself out of that. But once I got out, it was sort of like, okay, I made it through that. I can literally do anything. Totally. And I started like, sort of doing the work. I wish that I had sought out help, like professional help, to kind of work through everything that happened. But, with my friends and just a lot of exercise and a lot of spending time outdoors and a lot of like just really, really honest thoughtfulness, I did the work and really started to figure out where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do with my life. And, this kind of like newfound freedom, and this decision to say yes to, all the adventures that I could, it just, it really brought me back to life. Yeah. 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 That's the cool thing is, it sucks going through those hard times, but if you can go through the hardest thing you've ever done like that,
like you getting a divorce or leaving him or whatever the situation was, and me with my situation, just really, really up against it in my own head and seeking out the help of strangers, which was pretty much the hardest thing I ever did. Like, if you can do the hardest thing you ever did, then the sky's the limit. Once you break through that, it's like, well, now what? Ultra marathons, easy, like,
Yeah.
what's next? Can I write a book? Can I start a business? Like, sky's the limit now. Like, I've already done the hardest thing ever. So yeah, I mean, just good for you. I mean, it's gotta be pretty empowering and feel, I don't know, pretty damn good to come out on the other side of that. And now you're in a place where you can help not only other women, but just other people in general. So
Yeah, I mean, that's my hope at this point. When you first get out of that sort of thing, you're like, okay, you kind of have to be really selfish and sort of just make sure that you take care of yourself and take care of your needs and do the healing and do the work. But then, you start to think about it and you're like, there's a lot of other people who are in the same situation.
Yeah.
And, what can I do to help them? Like, I've figured something out for myself that works. So, like, how can I help other people figure something out for themselves? And so, yeah, it's kind of empowering on its own, once you look back and sort of see where you came from and see where you are now. I'm just like, who was I at that time?
Totally.
Like, who am I now? Like, how did I become this person?
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of, gratefulness that's there, looking back and kind of going, if it weren't for those experiences, I definitely would not be the person I am today. I wouldn't have the strength that I have now. Especially like, that kind of tenacity and grit that's required to go through some of these, big adventures that I've done. It's like, I think some of that stems from just those years of being sad and depressed and, dealing with that, like, constant fight or flight feeling, like, just like always being on edge. And, there's health issues that kind of come along with that as well, with like adrenal fatigue and all of that. So, like, I'm actually just now, years later, starting to feel like a normal human being again. So, and there's always the leftovers from all of that. Like, I have pretty crippling anxiety sometimes. It just pops up and, I'll have panic attacks. But I figured out ways to work through those things. And, part of that is with running, and exercise. Like, there's really nothing out there that compares to
nothing
what running or walking can do for you.
Yeah.
And so when I feel like that anxiety or that panic or, that sort of paralyzing, like, fear that suddenly comes on, for no reason, I'll head out the door. It's time for a run. And, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, whatever I need, I'll do. And then I'm able to kind of like get back into my productive self. So it's been a learning process trying to figure out exactly, what works for me and, like, when I start feeling those feelings, like, I need to get out the door now. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're looking at it from a mature point of view, though. If you can actually find something to be grateful for, like, yeah, all that sucked, right? But, if it wasn't for that, maybe I wouldn't have been a runner. I probably wouldn't have discovered running. Maybe I'd still be in that situation. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome that you're at this point. Have you found anything else? I mean, exercise works better than anything when it comes to anxiety, depression. You just have to get out and you have to sweat. You got to get that aggression out. Have you found anything else for you personally that works? Because, there's a million different avenues you can take, but it's not going to look the same for everybody. Like I do a little abstract artwork, and sometimes I'll play around with meditation or deep breathing techniques. Have you found anything else besides exercise that works?
Yeah, all of that.
Okay.
Yoga, meditation, breathing exercises, all of that is super helpful. I find that when I start feeling some anxieties and I can't just get out the door for a run, because sometimes you can't. And so, there's breathing, just deep breathing, focusing on the breath. That is tremendously helpful. Art is something that I used to do a lot of. I used to draw and paint and sculpt all the time. Ever since I was a kid, my mom's an artist. And so I grew up with all of that, all of those different mediums at my fingertips. And I actually thought at one point that I was, going to be a professional artist. And when I met this guy that I ended up marrying, he kind of squashed that part of me. And so I actually stopped doing art completely when I was with him, because I was embarrassed by it. And so, yeah, I've actually just recently started kind of going, okay, I need to find that part of me again. I need to find that creative side again and start doing art again. So I'm, kind of starting to gather stuff again and trying to find my paints, my watercolors that I used to have. They're somewhere, I don't know. So that's something that I want to start exploring again. And then writing has always helped me, even if it's not something that I share. I don't really have a journal per se, but I do sometimes just have to get feelings and thoughts out on paper. So I'll, sometimes take a page and just write things, words, whatever it is, doodles, scribble feelings, whatever it is. And that helps me too.
Totally. Yep. Nope. Couldn't agree more. Journaling is something that I've always done and something I've always found really helpful. Have you ever read the book, The Artist Way?
No, I haven't, but a really good artist friend of mine, she reads it like once a year.
Oh yeah. It's one of those books you could read once a year.
Yeah.
You should check it out. And, so one of the things she suggests is what she calls the morning pages. So every day when you wake up, just make it a practice to write 3 pages. And it could be complete gibberish. It can just be like, I don't want to do this today. Here's my grocery list, just whatever. You're just getting the crap off the top of your head so that you can focus on the rest of your day in a healthy way. You're just getting like the shit out, I guess is, I don't know exactly how you say it, but you just sit down and it's 3 pages of just gibberish and no one's ever going to see it. Maybe you'll read it someday, maybe not. And it's just like another version of a healthy morning meditation.
Yeah. I love that idea.
Yeah.
I think that's great because when I get up in the morning and I like get my morning coffee and I sit down at my computer, I'm like, okay, and write productively. And, like I have all this work to do. I gotta get these articles out. And sometimes I just sit there and stare at my computer for an hour because I can't, there's just too much going on to really focus. So maybe that's something I should try.
Yeah. Check it out. When did you decide to start a podcast? How did that all shake out?
So it started actually about a year ago, when I was like, okay, I want to like create these, retreats, and I want to start guiding, and I want to create a community, and how am I going to do that? And then I was like, I don't know how do you create a community? How do you build a community? And I really want to like create this feeling of community around my podcast, because it's not just a podcast. It's like, I want it to be a group of like-minded women who are able to like reach out to each other and ask questions and support each other. And so I was like, how do I make that happen? And so I had this one day, just had this idea. And I remember, I looked over at my partner and was like, oh my gosh, Women of the Wild. And he was like, what? like, Women of the Wild podcast. Oh my gosh, this is it. This is how I'm going to start it. And I like almost immediately like got the website, secured the Instagram. I like grabbed a YouTube channel. I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to make this happen. And I had no idea what I was doing. I've never done a podcast. I actually really always thought of myself as a writer, not a talker. And so I was like terrified. I'm going, how am I going to make this happen? I don't even like talking. How am I supposed to like interview people? Clearly since then I've sort of figured out that I sometimes talk too much.
No, you're a great talker. You're articulate. You are a perfect podcast host. No, same thing here. Like, yeah, I never wanted to be a podcast host. Like I listen to podcasts all the time, but when COVID, so we started this business called Big Things Crewing, and it, we're helping crew and pace people at their ultra marathons or supported FKTs or whatever it is. If they need they come to Colorado, they need a pacer, they can look us up and we can help them out. And then COVID hit, all the races were canceled, and same thing. I kind of wanted to build a community, but wasn't sure how. And I thought, well, I guess I could start a podcast. Like I suck at communicating. I suck at talking. Like I don't enjoy talking. I don't like talking on the phone. I don't like talking on the computer. I'm introverted by nature. So this is going to be a good practice for me. Like it's not going to be easy, but we'll give it a shot, and I'll just try and be as authentic as possible, and we'll see what happens. So
yeah.
How is your podcast going?
I mean, if I released episodes regularly, I think it would be going better.
Okay.
But I, like you said earlier, I have a lot of irons in the fire, and I have to try and pay my bills somehow. So the podcast doesn't always take priority, which makes me sad because I really want to just like dump every hour of every single day into this podcast and like all of the plans and ideas that I have for it. And the community. But I think, I think it's going well. I've had some really amazing guests on.
Yeah, you have.
And like every time I talk to one of these amazing ladies, it's like we become friends. Mm-hmm. And so as I've sort of met these ladies virtually, I'm like building this really cool friendships with all of them. And, we're like, once the COVID restrictions are lifted, let's go on adventures. Let's do FKTs together. And so that's been really cool for me on a personal level. But then I have people who reach out to me who are, men and women who are like, oh my gosh, that episode that you had about failure was so helpful to me. Or, that episode that you had about, the abusive relationships, that was really helpful to me. The PTSD episode was so great. It's nice to know there's other people out there like that. And so when you start getting these messages from people kind of saying like, wow, what you did was really meaningful. What you said meant a lot to me, and I feel inspired. It's really heartwarming. And you kind of realize that, what you're doing is good, and it's good for me as a person. But it's also, helping other people. And that's really the only thing that I could ask for. If I can help, one person out there figure something out or be inspired, then, I'm doing my job. Yeah. So yeah, that's actually one of my New Year's resolutions is going to be to record and release more podcasts, more episodes. Cause I've had the podcast for a year now. And I've only got like 16 episodes. And so it's like, I know I can do more than that. It's, I love the interviewing process. It used to scare the heck out of me, but now I really love it. Yeah. And now it's like the editing process that I have to really refine, because it's a little time consuming for me. And I'm really kind of perfectionist when it comes to, the way things sound and quality, and the, cutting out some of the ums and uhs. And for me, the likes and the ums. So I do that a lot.
Okay.
I
So
throw
you
a
do
lot there.
edit your podcast though. That must take a long time.
Yeah, it takes some time. I've gotten better at it. It's
Okay.
something that, like as you gain experience, it gets a little faster. And, at first I would try and edit so that, like so that it was perfect and there was no flaws in the podcast. And I kind of started to realize that, like those flaws and some of those, goofy things that I say or that, my guest says or something, it makes us human. And that's what people really want to hear, is that you're human. Especially some of these like elite ultra runners and mountain athletes that I have on. It's like, no, I want people to know that you're human, and that, you have feelings, and that, you process things just like everybody else, and you have the feelings that everybody else does. Sometimes they're doubts, sometimes it's, what's the word for it? Imposter syndrome. That one's a big one. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I really actually, I've really come to love podcasting and talking to my guests.
Yeah. Is that something you struggle with, imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think
Oh
all of
yeah.
us do.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Like what, like, yeah, it's kind of like one of, like, I'm like, why does he want to interview me?
Because I just want to talk to badasses. I think it's cool. It inspires other people. I just wanted to hear everything. So no, I appreciate it. I think it's super cool. So Women of the Wild is the name of your podcast. Great title. Yes. I mean, it's very catchy. I picture all women that are doing the kind of things that we're doing outside, running ultras, hiking long distances, gravitating towards that. I mean, it has a great title, super catchy. Where do you, when I record my podcast, it's on Anchor FM. Who's your host?
I have it hosted through Buzzsprout.
Well, okay. And you're on Spotify and Google?
I'm on everything, I think.
Oh, you're on everything. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Cool. I'm pretty sure I'm on Apple, which is like the kind of the main one. It seems like everybody listens on Apple podcasts. Google, Spotify. I was on SoundCloud for a while, but didn't get a lot of like listens through SoundCloud, and had to pay extra to have it on there. So I was like, I kind of discontinued having it on SoundCloud. Okay. But yeah, it's on Stitcher and all, pretty much anywhere.
From what I've heard, the best way to grow your podcast is consistency. So I'm going to have to call you out there.
I'm aware.
I'm sure you are. Like I try and do one a week. It's weird because, like this week I recorded 3 podcasts, so I've got them kind of stacked up for like the next 3 weeks. So I feel like I'm a little bit ahead of the curve, but yeah, some weeks you're just scrambling for a guest. Do you ever do like a solo podcast where it's just you talking about a certain subject, or do you always interview someone else?
So far I've always interviewed someone else. I do have some things in the works where it will be me talking, but it might just be one of those things where they're like mini episodes that I might release only to my patrons over at patreon.com.
Okay.
So it's something that it's been in the works, but I just, like sort of need to sit down and just do it.
Yeah.
I have some ideas for that. And yeah, the thing is like, if it's just me talking, I feel like it's not as interesting as, like having 2 people in a conversation. But I don't know, we'll see. Like after my next big FKT, I really want to share that story. Yeah. And so I might do a podcast by myself, just kind of telling the story. I might have, somebody come on who will interview me for my podcast.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
I'm considering that too, so that I can have a conversation with somebody. So yeah, but we'll see. I mean,
stay tuned. Yeah, we'll see. That's cool.
Always developing, always new ideas. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I like it. How did you get into the whole FKT thing? Did you start running ultras first and then discover the FKT world, or how did it all pan out
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah. So FKTs, I was always kind of aware of them on the periphery. Like, you sort of hear about, especially when you're in the ultra running community, you hear about people, running the rim to rim to rim of the Grand Canyon. You hear about people, setting records on the Appalachian Trail and the John Muir Trail. And, those are things that I always heard about, but sort of was like, oh, FKTs are for the pros, like, they're out of my reach. I'll never be able to do that. And, I've raced off and on. Racing has never really been my favorite thing. I understand why people love racing. There's the competition, there's the camaraderie. They're wonderful events. They're, like, you don't have to worry about, doing the logistics of the course, marking the course, having a map, usually, even food or like medical, all of that is there. It's all provided to you. And I think that's wonderful for most people. But for me, part of the draw of FKTs is being solo and doing the logistics myself. So when I discovered FKTs was a couple of years ago, let me take that back. When I discovered that I could do FKTs a couple of years ago, it was because of my boyfriend, Jason, and he started doing them. And he made me realize that FKTs are actually accessible and available to anybody. And I started looking at them and went after my first FKT. It'll be 2 years ago now. I think it's 2 years ago now in January, it'll be 2 years. And just really got hooked because I loved figuring things out on my own and really having to rely on myself while out there and not having, all of the sort of fanfare and commotion that happens with races. I'm not a super competitive person, honestly. Like, the reason I did the races was because it would get me out onto new trails, which is exactly what FKTs do for me, and probably even better than races do. I can find an FKT in a place that I probably normally wouldn't have ever explored or run, and go and explore these beautiful new trails that I might otherwise never have been on. And whether or not I actually get the FKT and set the record is not really that high on the priority list for me. For me, it's the experience of being out there and doing something new and pushing myself to my limits, or like, some of these FKTs that I've done have really pushed me past my comfort zones. And I love that. I love pushing myself and kind of rediscovering what I'm capable of doing. And I just think the human body it's so amazing what we can do and the adaptability of it. I love exploring that. And then just, I really like doing all of the logistics myself. I love, route planning. I love, maps. I like to plan out my nutrition. I like to, and for me, it kind of feels like the bigger and like more audacious it is like the better for me. I'm not a really fast runner, honestly. I can move well in certain terrains, probably better than a lot of people. But if you put me on a flat trail, I am slow. And that's one of the reasons maybe that races were never great for me, because I was always a kind of a middle of the packer, to the back. Sometimes it was the back of the packer. It just kind of like, it just lacked something for me. But when I'm out there doing an FKT, and, I might be racing against a clock, but there's nobody else out there with me. And that is like, I just have so much fun with it. And, you know, when you find these like beautiful routes that just call your name, you know, the next big one that I have coming up, I've been sort of planning for a year. And as soon as I found it, I was like, this is the one. Like this is like, I have to do this. And I actually, it's called the Death Valley Crossing, and it's about 165 miles from the northernmost point of Death Valley to the southernmost point of Death Valley. So it like traverses the entire valley through like, and Death Valley, you know, this is like heinous terrain.
It doesn't sound very friendly.
It's not friendly. But what actually makes this route so hard is that it's completely solo and unsupported. And there's a very strict ethic behind this route that it's unsupported, which means that, you know, being Death Valley, there's no really natural springs that you can fill up your water at. So you have to carry your water from the very beginning for the entire thing, which just adds this like element of difficulty. You know, you can't just go and, you know, take a couple of days and run 165 miles through Death Valley unsupported with, you know, 15 to 20 liters of water on your back. You actually have to sort of plan out these big mileage days and structure it so that, you know, you're like metering out your water throughout this, but then like figuring out at what point do I get too dehydrated? How much water do I have to bring so that I don't get dehydrated? But you can't take so much water that you can't move efficiently. So it's just like this really, it's like a puzzle. And so I actually tried it last February. I went for it and I got almost right about to the 100-mile mark and ran low on water. And that's not to say like I was really beat up. That the terrain there is gnarly. And it beat me up. But if I hadn't run low on water, there's no way I would have quit, because it was such a crazy, amazing experience. So this time I'm going back with more water, better training, better gear. And hopefully I'll be able to finish it this time.
Yeah. How do you strategize carrying water throughout that? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'm planning on taking 20 liters of water this time. I have 2 10-liter dromedary bags that I've actually have in my pack that I put on and walk around with. So
it's a heavy pack you're carrying.
Okay. It's a heavy pack. I've been training with it. And what I'll do is I haven't decided how much water I'm going to let myself drink every day. It'll probably fluctuate a little bit depending on the weather. But I'll give myself a certain amount of water that I'm allowed to have per day while I'm out there. And I'll, you know, measure out the water into separate vessels, like, you know, bladders, like 2-liter bladders, and kind of let myself meter it out that way. Well, I mean, it's hard to say, because the last time I did it, there was one day I was out there for like 2.5 days, and I drank like 5 liters on the first day because it was so hot and I was just pouring sweat, and I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. And I underestimated the terrain, because on paper it looks flat. Like, it actually looks downhill on paper, because you start at like 6,000 feet of elevation and you end up at negative 262 feet of elevation. Like, so it's like, it looks all downhill, but once you're in it, it's the terrain is so varied and so difficult to pass through. It's like, it's all off trail. I don't think I mentioned that. So you're not on roads, you're not on trails. It's all off trail navigation, which is another part that I really enjoy about this effort, is the route finding and the navigation. But you're going in and out of these really rocky washes. You end up going through the mesquite sand dunes, which are pretty rough. That was the hardest part of the whole entire thing that I experienced last time was through the sand dunes. Like I just felt like I was just drowning in sand. They're so tall, and you have, this heavy pack on, and you're like trying to swim up these really steep sandy, and you just like slide down the other side. And, it's just over and over again, just never ending sand dunes. And I remember thinking at that point, I was in night 2, and I was going through the sand dunes at like between midnight and like 4 a.m. It took me a while to get through them. And I was just like, I think I'm stuck here forever. Like, this is a never ending loop of sand dunes. So it was kind of a really crazy experience. And then I got to the other side of the dunes and tried to take a nap, and it got down below freezing that night, and my gear I wasn't prepared for temperatures that low. And so I ended up shivering for about 2 hours in my bivvy, and then just packed up and kept going after, no sleep. But that's kind of one of the strategies that I have going into this, is to get, to move as much as possible on as little sleep as possible. So, I'll take naps here and there, but I'm not planning on like setting up camps or anything. I'll again have my little bivvy with me, and when I get too tired to move, I'll lay down and try a nap. If I can't nap, I keep moving.
Okay.
I'll be.
What's the current FKT?
So there's no women's time on it.
Oh.
There's been a couple of tries, but nobody's been able to finish it. The men's time on it right now is like 6 days and 23 hours.
Okay.
I want to do it faster than that.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah,
the last time you attempted, were you on track to beat that time?
I was.
That the goal then? Okay.
Yeah, that was the goal last time, and it's the goal this time. Yeah. So I was on track. Like I said, I got almost to right around 100-mile mark last time, and I was about 2.5 days in. And so this time, I'm going to try and make it further than that. Try to make my days a little bit more efficient than I did last time. And yeah, the ideal for me would be like 4.5 days. I realize that might be out of reach with the amount of weight that I have to carry. Mm-hmm. So I'm, hoping right around 5 days would be great. Do
you have a date planned?
Yeah.
Well, an
approximate.
Is it top secret?
It's not top secret. It's actually, so one of the things about this route is that, since I'm planning on moving through the nights, I want a full moon. And the full moon in Death Valley is like glorious. Yeah. It's absolutely beautiful. And the full moon at the end of this month is when I'm planning on doing it. So I'll probably start about like 2 days before the actual full moon, so that I can go through the full moon in a couple days after.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask as well, so you're moving throughout the night because it's way cooler then, right? So are you taking naps during the day, or how does that look?
So last time I did it, I tried to move through the night and then take a nap like right before sunrise, which didn't work out because it actually gets really, really cold at that time. Okay. And so I'll probably be trying to take a nap in the day rather than the night and try to move through the night, just because it is kind of nicer and easier to sleep when it's warm out. And I'll be able to sort of set up my bivvy like a little shade shelter and lay underneath it if I need to in the sun. There's not a lot of shade out there. But luckily, one of the reasons that you do this time of year is because it's a lot cooler in the day. So hopefully I won't experience temperatures higher than 75, which still, even so when you're on the salt flats there, 75 still feels like an oven. The salt flats just really reflect that sun back at you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's usually not a lot of wind out there. And so it feels like you're in an oven sometimes.
Yeah.
Which was another thing that I didn't expect last time. I was like, oh, 70 degrees, it's going to be perfect. And I ended up overheating out in the middle of the salt flats last time. So yeah, I learned a lot of lessons.
For sure. I would guess that something of this magnitude is pretty much all consuming. It's probably all you're thinking about, all you're focusing on. Are you doing heat training, like sauna training? Are you adjusting your diet anyhow? Or like, how's it all going?
Well, so last time I did it, I was actually kind of a strict vegan, and I had a really hard time recovering from it, honestly. And I'm not sure if that was, I didn't have my diet very dialed at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right now I'm not on any kind of like strict diet. I just eat what I want when I want. And that could be meat. It could be cheese. Like I've eaten a lot of cheese recently for some reason. But, and like I haven't actually been restricting calories at all. I really prefer intuitive eating where I eat what I feel my body needs. And, of course I, try to eat healthy and I try to eat whole foods. I steer away from processed foods, but I don't like restrictive dieting.
Mm-hmm.
So intuitive eating is definitely how I've been doing it recently. And I feel like that it works really well for me. I might try to go plant-based again at some point, but it takes a lot of work to do that and make sure that you get everything that you need. And I honestly, like, I have a really hard time like keeping track of all of those things. And so, like my protein and stuff like that, making sure I get enough protein and B vitamins and iron and everything. So very much intuitive eating. Food during the effort is going to be a little different. I'm not taking a stove. So I'm not going to have any kind of hot meals or cooked meals. I am going to actually take a page from Abby Hall's book when she did the John Muir Trail and do the cold soaked ramen.
Okay. Cool.
Because that actually takes very little water, and it'll be nice to kind of have something that feels more like a meal out there.
Mm-hmm.
Last time I had, like nutrition bars and protein powders, and like Tailwind was it was a huge thing for me when I tried it before, but it's also going to be really important for this upcoming attempt. But I'm going to take more real food this time. My mom recently baked a bunch of snickerdoodle cookies. And so I'm going to take some of those, and every 25 miles or so, they're going to be my treat for, like a little present to myself for getting another 25 miles in.
Yeah.
So yeah, food will look a little bit different this time. And yeah, and then, as far as recovery, I eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
And that could be whatever I'm craving. Hamburger, pizza, could be a huge salad. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to celebrate too. You got to eat some good food afterwards.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm picturing a really heavy pack.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds really heavy. Like how heavy?
So, 20 liters of water is about 44 pounds.
Oof.
So then you add whatever other gear on top of that. Yeah. I'm going to go as minimal as possible, but I also still have to keep in mind that, it gets cold at night. Mm-hmm. And so I need those extra layers with me. So, between all of the water and the food and everything, I'm imagining my pack is probably going to be somewhere around 55 pounds would be my guess. I haven't put everything in my pack yet and weighed it. I'm kind of scared too.
Right.
But yeah, so it's heavy, but I feel like for me, it's manageable.
Okay.
Especially with like, I got a new pack for this one. I was really fortunate in that somebody sponsored and sponsored me and paid for a new pack for me. So I got a really nice hyperlight backpack for it. Yeah. And it is like phenomenal, even loaded down. It's got about 50 pounds in it right now, and I'm amazed at how comfortable it is.
Wow.
So that's going to be huge. I'll be using kind of lightweight, as like everything as lightweight as possible. So I'm going to be using the Lakey poles. They're sending some to me. I've got my like lightweight layers that I'll be bringing, trying to trim as much weight as possible so that I can carry the water that I need.
Yeah. Are snickerdoodles going to be your only luxury item?
Probably not. I'm probably going to have some other candy bars out there. I'm actually not much of a sweets person. I really love crunchy, savory things. So like, I'm gonna take a bag of chips with me, because like I really crave those things when I'm working, when I'm exercising really hard. And so I'll be taking a bag of chips, and I'll do the Kelly Halpin trick where I'll crunch them down real small so that they take up very little space, and keep them in a bag and just kind of scoop and eat as I go.
Nice.
Goldfish crackers are another one that I really love when I'm out on the trail, because you can just kind of like hold the bag in your hand and just and snack away as you're walking along. And that's kind of really key for me. I find that I'm really bad at fueling when I'm out on these big things. Even last time it was like, all my stuff's in my backpack, and I'm like too lazy to stop and pull the food out so that I can eat it. And so I'm going to try and make everything as like easy and accessible as possible. And what's nice about this bag is it's got these two huge pockets on the side of the bag itself, and it's got pockets on the hips too. So I'll be able to put snacks and things that are actually reachable. And that's probably going to be a big game changer for me, is actually fueling while I'm moving.
Yeah. Trekking poles, you said. I almost hate to ask this question because it's so elementary, but what kind of shoes are you going to be wearing?
Hoka
Hokas,
shoes.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
They actually sent me a pair of those new 10.9s, those hiking boots, and they're actually incredibly comfortable, and they have that kind of big heel that sticks out the back.
Oh yeah.
And that kind of acts as like, it almost propels you forward a little bit. They're also Gore-Tex, so it'll keep all the like dust and stuff out. And so I did a big hike in them this last weekend. I ended up at the Grand Canyon for the weekend, and I did the South Kaibab Trail down to the river and back. And it was the first time I'd worn the Hoka 10.9s, and they performed really well. It was like, 14 miles round trip with 5,000 feet of drop and then 5,000 feet of climbing. And I was kind of stunned at how good my feet felt afterwards. And I sort of was like, all right, these like, they have a little extra support, with the heavy pack on, I think they're going to be perfect. So that's what I'm planning on wearing. There's still some, like, I still want to test them out a little bit before I commit. But I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be wearing those.
Cool. There's not really bailout points there in Death Valley, is there, or is there?
There are actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll cross a few roads.
Okay.
While I'm going along. And you almost parallel a couple of the main roads, but you end up so far away from them that it's almost like they don't exist. But you do cross a couple of roads. So there's a few like major bailout points. The crux of it is going to be, once I reach a certain point, the like last 60 miles or so, there's really not a bailout option. There is a 4-wheel drive road that goes in that way. That kind of goes along the route, but you really have to have a special vehicle to travel on that because it's such deep sand and gravel.
Okay.
I don't know that, anybody that I know with their 4-wheel drive vehicles, if they'd be able to get through that, because there's so much sand and so much gravel. So it's not a very well-traveled road.
Sure.
And, the kind of rules of the game for this route is that it's totally off trail and off road. So, I can't use the road to walk on either. So, and, since I definitely want to take the most efficient lines for me, which means that I end up veering quite a long ways away from the road, in most places. But I'm hoping, so the last like major bailout point is where I cross the road at West Side Road, which is a dirt road that kind of goes across the valley near Badwater Basin and then heads south a ways. And that'll be kind of my last major bailout point. And that's actually where I bailed last time, was at the West Side Road.
Is Jason or somebody going to be sort of close and on call while you're out there?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, Death Valley has a lot of potential for other FKTs. And so Jason's going to be going and adventuring and exploring while I'm doing the crossing. And we have actually the Spot X GPS locators and communicators. And so we'll be able to keep in touch using that. My dad also wants to be in Death Valley when I'm doing it. Last time, it was really hard for me to, I couldn't stop him from coming and checking on me, which kind of goes against the supported or unsupported ethic behind this route. So I had to tell my dad this time that okay, you cannot come and check on me. I can't, I don't want to talk to you. I'm sorry, but I don't want, this needs to be completely unsupported. You can't come and check on me. And he's like, no, I get it. So we're all on the same page. He's not going to come and randomly check on me, and take pictures of me like he did last time. So yeah, it'll be 100% unsupported. The only contact that I'll be able to have with anybody is through the Spot X tracker. Okay.
What are your biggest fears going into this?
Failing again. It's such a big, gnarly route. And it's funny because if you think about it, 165 miles, it's like, most ultra runners would be able to pull that off in a couple days. But because of how it's done and because of the unsupported style, it's like, how is my body going to hold up to carrying that much weight, for 30 plus miles a day? Last time I ended up with these horrible pressure sores on my shoulders. My feet were just blistered and full of that kind of, I ended up going through this big mud pit that was there, that I couldn't navigate around really. And so I ended up with this really nasty, black, brackish, stinky mud, in all my blisters. And, it's really scary. There's also the thought of, what if I restrict my water too much and I get too dehydrated? What if I get hypothermic at night? That happened to Jason when he tried it, because he tried it last year as well. And I think actually last December. And he became hypothermic one night and like there, it's very real out there. Even at one point last time when I was going through this mud, I remember I had read this story about this guy who went out into Death Valley and got stuck in the mud and ended up dying because he couldn't get out of the mud. He was so mired. Oof, and so sunk. Yeah. And sunk. And I just kept thinking about that when I was out there. I was like, oh my gosh, what if that happens to me? What if I sink into this mud? I have this big heavy pack on and, and it's probably completely unrealistic, but those things go through your head and you're like, it would not be easy to be extracted from some of those areas out there. So it feels very remote. The temperature can be really extreme, even in the wintertime. I'm more worried about cold rather than heat. When I get cold, I get really cold and it's hard for me to warm up. So I have to make the decisions to, take the right kind of gear so that I can actually stay warm in the nights, but not so much that it makes my pack heavy and I have unnecessary gear. And so there's always that worry of like, oh gosh, what if I make the wrong decision? And what if I do end up hypothermic and, nobody can get to me for hours because I'm, in this middle of this like rock field. It's not like anybody can just drive out there. And so, those thoughts definitely crossed my mind. But that's part of pushing yourself in these things and kind of figuring out your limits. And, I am not a huge risk taker. I know it doesn't seem like it, but all the risks I take are very calculated. Sure. And I don't typically do something that I'm not confident that I can pull off. So I'm going into it. There's that fear, sure. But that's part of why we do this, is embracing that fear and sort of being able to figure out how to navigate through that. And, I say that the reason I like these things is because I have to rely on myself and, do all of the problem solving and everything on my own. And I can't help it. I feel like I need to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. You got it.
So.
You got it. And a dose of fear is healthy. Like if you had no fear, I'd be worried, right? Like you should almost like fear everything, but then just prepare as much as you can to go out and just nail it. I mean, all you can do is prepare 100%, show up super fit, and then it's up to the fates,
Yeah.
It just is what it is. So, but you've got to be scared to a certain extent.
Yeah. And I feel like if you're not scared going into these things, why are you doing them?
Yeah.
That's where you learn a lot about yourself, is kind of in that fear management and, managing all the things that come along with it. And, going through the nights, being out in the wilderness alone at night and moving through the night always comes along. It brings its own type of fear and worries along with it too. Like, I'm not really scared of coyotes. There's a lot of coyotes in Death Valley, but the last time I actually saw a lot of mountain lion prints out there too. Okay. So there's like a little bit of fear for wildlife, but not a lot. There's like huge tarantulas in Death Valley too, and that's almost scarier than the mountain lions.
You got it, Ashley. You got it. It sounds like you're super prepared. What's your training like going into this? Are you putting in big mileage?
Yeah, I've put in some big mileage weeks. It's been kind of weird for me because I have done less running, more hiking.
Sure.
And a lot more weightlifting. Like so weightlifting has never really been a big part of my training program. But this time going into it, I was like, okay, my body needs to be able to handle a heavy pack for days. And so how do I do that? Well, I train with heavy weights. That's like in my mind, I was like, that just makes sense. So I've been training with heavy weights, and which has been hard because my gym keeps opening and closing because of COVID. And so I've had to, kind of figure out my training program, and while not having a gym and not really having, a house that I'm at all the time. So it's been interesting. I've actually started using my loaded backpack as weights. And so, I've been throwing that around and lifting it and moving it in different ways, just like I would be, when I'm out in the field, just like lifting it up and putting it on and taking it off, and carry, like farmer carries with it. And, as much as I can to kind of prepare my body for what it's going to have to endure out there.
Yeah. You got this. I'm pumped up just listening. This is cool. I can't wait to hear about it. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm so stoked about it.
Yes. Good luck. Just enjoy every moment out there. I mean, even when it sucks, there's going to be people at work that just wish they could come out and do something like this. So
yeah, that's true.
Just stay positive, just stay in the right mind frame, and just keep moving forward. You know how to do this stuff.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's a big walk, right? I can do that.
Yeah.
It's just a big walk.
So cool. Website. Do you have any place where we can find you? I know you're on social media. Are you going to be posting anything while you're out there? Probably not.
No, so there's like no service in Death Valley.
No service.
So
okay.
My phone is going to go on airplane mode to conserve battery.
Good.
And you won't hear from me for several days, but I don't know. Jason might end up posting updates on his Instagram or Facebook. We haven't really talked about it that much, but I will, I've been posting leading up to it, and I will definitely be, doing some follow-up posts. I'll probably write about it a lot. So there's going to be some stories coming out of it. My Instagram is pretty easy to find. It's just my first and last name. It's Ashley.Winchester. And Ashley is spelled without an E. It's ASHLY .Winchester. And then, Women of the Wild has an Instagram, and that's WOMXN of the Wild. Women of the Wild. And same with the website, womenofthewild.com. So those are kind of the main places that you can find me. I do have a Facebook, but and I post to it, but I don't really pay that much attention to it.
Same with everybody.
I know, right? Instagram is really the place to find me and connect. Cool. I try to get back to all the messages that I receive on there. And that's kind of where you'll find me. And then I'll be sharing on my podcast, Women of the Wild.
Yeah. Once a week, right? You
I know you're calling me out on it right now.
Totally. I mean, come on, we got to build this thing.
I know.
All right. Well, check out Women of the Wild podcast. Watch Ashley as she goes out and kills this thing. And I can't wait to hear about it. And you're going to have a lot of messages. I think when you turn your phone on, people are going to be like, go Ashley, go. So, yeah.
I hope so. I will also have live tracking during the Death Valley crossing. And so I'll share that when it's closer to the go time. Cool. So everybody will be able to follow along live, which will be fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to hear about it. I can't wait to see pictures. I can't wait to read about it. It's going to be awesome. So get out there and get it.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. You've been gracious with your time and telling us all kinds of stories. So just keep doing what you're doing, Ashley. You're killing it. You're inspiring people. Keep up with everything, the writing, the podcast. It's all good stuff.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. It was so much fun talking to you and
Very cool.
Sharing my story. It's kind of cool to be on the other side of the
I know.
podcast.
Were you like analyzing me from an interviewer's point of view?
No, no, I was.
Okay.
Everybody has like different ways that they interview.
Yeah, totally.
But I actually do it very similar to you, where it's very conversational.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the best way. I don't usually like
I
write
think
down
so.
questions beforehand or
Yeah.
And I'm not going to edit the ums out. I'm just going to leave it as is.
You're just gonna leave it as is. Okay.
Ashley, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Good luck out there, and
Thank
keep
you.
doing your thing. All right. Talk to you
Thanks so
soon.
much.
You bet.